which can be a powerful tool. Again, vaccines is not easy to develop. They're also quite expensive, and they cannot be developed easily for all infections. There is another one, which is sort of an even older strategy than antibiotics, and that's bacteriophages. This is the time, unfortunately, when everybody's reading about viruses. Well, not all viruses are bad either. Some viruses actually are used as a therapeutic tool. Just as they would infect a human cell, they can also infect a bacterial cell, commandeer its machinery, and basically kill it. Those bacteria are called bacteriophages, discovered about 100 years ago, actually a little more than 100 years ago, first by Englishman Mr. Twort, and then Dr. Twort, and then sort of by another French-Canadian professor, Felix de Hegel. So they were used initially as a very potent tool to fight infection. They sort of lost momentum because antibiotics were easy to produce. They could be produced in vast quantities, and there was also skepticism about them because the country that was really taking the lead in producing them was on the other side of the Iron Curtain. That was the Soviet Union. In late 1980s, certainly through the 90s and early 2000s, they have come back as a potent tool. And there have been some studies showing that they can be very, very useful. The challenge with that is that we do not have enough clinical trials under our belt yet to really suggest their widespread use. There are lots of important questions that need to be asked, but I think there is certainly hope and certainly promise there. My own sense, Jesse, is that we will not be in a situation where they'll completely replace antibiotics, but they can certainly complement, which is exactly what we need right now, is to have a more diverse set of approaches, antibiotics and bacteriophages, and potentially, in some cases, vaccines as well, as we have seen in the case of typhoid, which might sort of allow us to really save ourselves from this very, very problematic situation that we're in.
I promised listeners we would finish with some optimism. So what is there to be optimistic about?
Well, so I think there are several things. One, I think there are countries that have turned the course of, if you look at the data of people who suffer from microbial resistant infections, Scandinavia is an excellent example. Netherlands is also another example. New Zealand has done well. So these are countries that have shown that you could do it with good policies and sort of good practice. So that's the first avenue. The second one, I think, is an appreciation that this is no longer a science problem alone. If we assume that scientists alone are going to get us out of this, I think we'll be disappointed. By bringing together people from public health and banking and finance and economics and law and certainly national security, there are examples where people are taking some real solutions which can make a difference. What is going to tip the balance, and I argue about that in the book, is basically a set of three things. First of all, we have to recognize that this is a problem in which everybody has to take a part. You cannot have 3 countries do it and rest 190-something not do it. The second thing is you have to ensure sort of greater efforts towards world peace. And that sounds like a cliche statement. Actually, places where conflict is rife are places where antimicrobial resistance is a continuous problem. So we really have to do this, not just because it's the ethically right thing to do, it's the right thing to do from a humanitarian perspective, but also for public health of that region and beyond. And third thing is that we have to invest in sort of this broad portfolio of basic science and applied science and economics and sort of legal contracts across countries. If we do that, I think there is enough momentum in all of these individual sectors that we can really turn things around. Because I think that it's a story of human behavior. It's not a story of sort of bacteria alone. It's a story of human behavior. And if you sort of put that in perspective and bring it in the context of how we can change our collective behavior so that it helps everybody, I remain optimistic, cautiously optimistic indeed, but I remain optimistic that it can be done. But if we don't do it, then I think the writing is on the wall.
Well, there's more in the book. It's called Biography of Resistance, the epic battle between people and pathogens. And I've been speaking with Mohammed Zaman, Professor of Biomedical Engineering and International Health at Boston University. Thanks for your time and your expertise and the knowledge that you're putting into the world, Mohammed. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to me, and good luck. Thank you.
We'll try and get in some of our fresh music daily ahead of this media conference. This is from Christchurch, Illustrate.
When the stars come out and you need another's touch, it may take all night, but you gotta let it take you out. As I stare at every blip and I hear every beat, no matter how out of time, you gotta let it take you out. Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? I don't know yet, thought I knew ya. Couldn't handle the pain you went through. Now I know that I spoke too soon. If I stolen this day, but I'm running out of time. And God, I know that heaven's only moments away. You gotta let it take you out. Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? I don't know yet, thought I knew ya. Couldn't handle the pain you went through. Now I know that I spoke too soon. Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? Hallelujah, 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 what's gotten into you? I don't know yet, thought I knew ya. Couldn't handle the pain you went through. Now I know that I spoke too soon. Hallelujah, stars come out and you need another's touch. It may take all night, but you gotta let it take you out. Gotta let it
RNZ National, very pleased to introduce you to that artist if you haven't come across them before. They're known as Dillustrate, and they're actually a duo. Neo Soul is how they describe their sound. Henare H. Carr and Tim Driver, and under normal circumstances, they're touring machines. They've taken their show around New Zealand more than 10 times in the last few years, playing headline shows and supporting other acts like Catch a Fire and Sons of Zion. They were in with us on New Zealand Live back in September, and that track's called Too Soon, which is from their debut self-titled album, which came out in December. We're premiering the song's official video today. If you like the sound of it, you can catch the video on our webpage, rnz.co.nz/Jesse, and that video was produced in collaboration with Christchurch choreographer Chloe Livings and dancers from her dance school, and it's quite stunning if you get a chance to check it out at some point. We are waiting to go to David Clark, the Minister of Health, with an anticipated announcement on changes to the guidance around funerals and tangihanga. It was the key aspect of Level 2 life that had attracted the most criticism. A lot of people were talking about the inconsistencies between, 100 people being allowed to go to a movie theatre at the same time, and yet people not being able to go to a funeral and distance appropriately. So it does sound like the government has taken some of that criticism, has spoken to some relevant groups, and is getting ready to make an announcement on the topic. I don't think we've ever had so many crucial government announcements in a 2-month period, because tomorrow it's budget day, which would ordinarily be probably the first time of the year that we would cross live to Parliament during our show, but of course we've been doing it every day in the meantime. Now, we do break format on afternoons for budget day, and we do that each year, but this year will be particularly significant. So from 2 o'clock tomorrow, we will go to Parliament to hear Grant Robertson's budget speech. That will be presented by Corin Dan, but we'll also have expert analysis, and we get a lot of information at once. So we'll get the help of Giles Beckford, who is business and economics, and Jane Patterson, who is RNZ's political editor. And they'll take us through the announcements as we get them. That's between 2 and 3 tomorrow. Also, I'd love to tell you about this, which is this giveaway that we're doing tomorrow. Link 3 Day, Thursday. We play you 3 songs and you tell us what the songs have in common. And tomorrow I've just come across something which I think you'll like, because RNZ listeners tend to be Prince fans on the whole. So tomorrow we're giving away actually 2 albums. We're giving away Purple Rain, the classic, and we have given away that one before, but there's a reason we're giving it away again. And we're also giving away a rare 12-inch edition of Pop Life, which was actually a B-side to Raspberry Beret, but then was released in its own right, I believe. Anyway, I'll tell you more about the giveaway tomorrow. But to win, you have to tell us what our 3 songs have in common, and we'll be playing them throughout the afternoon. As I say, we'll sort of be fitting around the budget tomorrow, but we play you 3 songs, you work out what the theme is, and the first person to get it right, who hasn't won before, will take away the vinyl. So plenty of reasons to tune in tomorrow from 1 p.m. Now, as we continue to wait for David Clark, the Minister of Health, to arrive, he's about 10 minutes late for this live stream. I'm going to hand over to Wallace Chapman, who's standing by for the pre-panel. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow from 1 p.m. Right now, it's 21 to 4.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, kia ora koutou, welcome to the RNZ. Welcome to the panel, RNZ National, as we await this press conference. We're going to be talking today about concerns being raised about what some see as government overreach of power and rushed legislation. We're debated today in Parliament. Professor of Law Al Gillespie with us there. Also, massive challenges ahead for us outlined in the budget. So can we expect any radical proposals, especially around tax? What about a wealth tax? Maybe a financial transactions tax? Tax expert Terry Belcher with us. And can you believe it, just over 4 months to the general election. Are we ready for it? And is it the time to try online voting? Is this the time to try it? We discuss. Plus the budget wish list with our panellists. What is in your budget wish list? And we do have a listener midweek poem for you also. And happy 70th birthday to one Stevland Hardaway Morris. Stevland Hardaway Morris, otherwise known as Have a Guess. Very, very famous musician. 70th birthday. Text us 2101 or email the panel at rnz.co.nz. And with me today is Victoria Stewart, partner and CEO of technology law firm Simmons Stewart. Victoria, welcome to the panel.
Hi, Wallace. Great to be here.
It's nice to have you on, Victoria, and likewise to Selwyn Manning, founder of Multimedia Investments Limited and investigative political journalist. Kia ora, Selwyn.
Kia ora, Wallace. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Nice to have you on the panel. And I think that we can sneak in, for the moment at least, a little bit of a story of the day with our very own Emma Hurley. Hello, Emma. No, Emma's not here. That's all good. No, we are going to be waiting for Health Minister David Clark and Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield. They're making an announcement about the rules for tangihanga and funerals. That is to come very, very shortly. But we do have a bit of time up our sleeves. So why don't we start with, I've been thinking, with Victoria Stewart.
Thanks, Wallace. It's very hard to think of anything that's not COVID related. Of course, I've been in a bubble by myself, which has been a bit miserable, but I popped into the office yesterday to just do some cleaning and organising because we're coming back next week, and picked up some provisions on the way, cleaning stuff, and I couldn't get a spray bottle with bleach or Dettol in it. And I was just reminded, 2 months ago, you could get everything you wanted that had bleach in it and Dettol because it was so unpopular. And now the only thing I could get was natural cleaning products, which I love, but of course they don't quite do the job. So I was just thinking about the fact that it'll be an awesome thing when we finally have had a chance to do some testing of this virus to see whether there's any efficacy for using natural cleaners, because, bleach is such a terrible thing on the environment, so necessary at the moment, but it's just such a shame that there's, these massive impacts on our environment as a result of this virus, while the natural cleaners sort of sit there pristine and unused.
It's amazing, isn't it, the return of the bleach. We hadn't used bleach in our household for actually, quite a long time. It's been all about, as you say, those natural products, which are very popular right now. But isn't it extraordinary how things have done such an about turn? All of a sudden, bleach is back in.
Yep. No, I've got several bottles in my house and have been using it. And actually, I love the smell, which is a bit odd, but it's a must-have at the moment, isn't it?
And how have you been finding lockdown, Victoria? How have you been coping with it?
Well, I've been in a bubble by myself with 2 cats, and I'm a bit of an introvert, so it's been okay. I am looking forward to getting back to the office and sort of catching up with friends in person as compared to over Zoom. But look, I've been fine. I'm a bit sick of it, is probably the best way to describe it.
So 11:59 p.m. tonight, we go to a level 2. You're looking forward to it?
Absolutely, but I'm not sure much will change for me. I'm really looking forward to getting back into the office. We've got a lot of young lawyers in our team, and I think they're looking forward to sort of just getting back into a bit more structure and routine in their life. So I think level 2 is going to be good. I just hope everyone is sensible and remembers social distancing and all the rules that we've learnt over the past couple of months. I'm just a bit worried we might stuff it up, I guess.
All right, I've been thinking with Selwyn Manning. Selwyn.
Yeah, I'm kind of preoccupied with this space, Wallace, in that, right now and in the months ahead, it's the most crucial time, obviously, to solidify and to really lock down on our trading elements of our economy, really making the most that we possibly can, feed those trading partners that we have. And like we know, this week, China blocked barley imports from Australia. Now, that put up signals, and really big concerns immediately. And yesterday, it banned meat imports from a selected number of Australian export producers. Now, in the latter case, China takes exception with the labelling, apparently, of the exported meat and cites health issues relating to protecting its own citizens' health as behind that move. But as ABC reports, Wallace, the context behind this is the United States, Trump administration's accusations of China that created the COVID-19 in a lab, and also Australia's call for an inquiry into COVID-19 and how it went viral. Now, the cautionary part of this, and this kind of issue I've been thinking about, is clearly New Zealand too has backed Australia's call for an inquiry into COVID-19. Now, New Zealand, we need to demonstrate right now our hard-earned credentials as an honest broker on the world stage, and in particular, not to apply any further sensitivity or things that create a reaction from China on this issue, and not put it to the test, basically, is what I'm saying there, Wallace. I think caution is the thing there.
Because why? Essentially, because a lot is relying. If the budget tomorrow is going to be all about jobs, we need to have those supply chains running from China and getting trade back up again.
Couldn't say it better, Wallace. That's absolutely right. And the other thing is trying to actually maximise your opportunity with our biggest trading partner at a time when we need it. We need foreign capital coming in. What better relationship have we got from the point of view of feeding a nation like China, which obviously has got huge scope to increase, perhaps even on the volumes that we've got now. Any kind of foreign affairs kind of kickback on this and creating more sensitive kind of responses from China at this time, I think would be folly. I'm not saying we should all be grovelling around our trading partners' feet, but I'm saying, we do not have to fall into this kind of, pushing the envelope, which can be perceived perhaps as being the South Pacific's brokers for the Trump administration's want here. That seems to me to be the issue of sensitivity that we have to make sure, once again, we get back to New Zealand, really underscore the fact that we are considered an honest broker there. Our Prime Minister is held in extremely good regard in China. We know that from the bilaterals, and our previous Prime Minister, John Key, was as well. So we can use that perhaps to actually cool the tempers down here.
All right. Just a flash here. Up to 50 people will be allowed at funerals and tangihanga if strict public health measures are in place. That again, up to 50 people will be allowed at funerals and tangihanga if strict public health measures are in place. And the government has backed down over a 10-person funeral cap, allowing up to 50 attendees as long as public health measures are in place. So we await a stand-up, or I'm not quite sure if that's going to be happening now, but we will come to you if that does happen. But I do think that RNZ's Emma Hurley is on standby for our...
Kia ora koutou. Tomorrow New Zealand will move into Alert Level 2. The change will see much more of our economy reopen and allow for much more social interaction. The fact that we're in a position to loosen our lockdown earlier than many other countries is due in no small part to the efforts and sacrifices that all New Zealanders have made in recent weeks. I want to again thank the public for the work they've done to break the chain of transmission and keep people safe. The results speak for themselves, but we cannot afford to take anything for granted. As we've seen overseas, COVID-19 is hard to eliminate, and a second wave of cases is always a possibility. So we do need to remain vigilant as we move into Level 2 and the safer normal that it represents. One of the most difficult issues that we as a government have grappled with is funerals and tangihanga. Around the world, we have seen the virus spread at funerals, as well as a second wave of infection taking hold just as countries were getting on top of the virus like we are now. For example, a funeral of 100 people in the US led to an outbreak resulting in 30 deaths across one county. 3 funerals in South Africa led to 200 cases, and 143 cases in Canada have been linked to one funeral home. But in recent days, there has been very real and understandable public concern about the announcement that funerals were initially to be limited to 10 people. It is one of the most basic of human instincts to gather and grieve when we lose a loved one. We have listened to those concerns. This morning I spoke with several funeral directors. The Prime Minister spoke with church leaders, and I understand Minister Henare and Davis have spoken with iwi leaders. I'm pleased to announce that we have found a sensible solution that keeps people safe and allows more flexibility around funerals and tangihanga. From tomorrow, funeral directors can submit a form that registers for an exemption to allow up to 50 people to attend a funeral, as long as the Ministry of Health is satisfied, and they'll be satisfied by way of it being a funeral director who's suitably qualified that applies, that director has filled out the form which indicates a range of public health measures can consistently be met, such as physical distancing, hand hygiene, and having no food or drink congregations of those 50 people afterwards. That will mean more family and friends will be able to gather and grieve together. I hope that will provide some solace to people as they farewell their loved ones. Happy to take your questions.
You recognise that there are still inconsistencies. Say a family wanted to have a funeral of 60, they can't do that, but they could go to a restaurant and be under the same roof with 100 or 99 other strangers.
Different situation in that, of course, people at funerals go to comfort one another, they go to grieve, and they go to mix and mingle. That is part of the process of funerals, whereas in a restaurant we have people who will be expected and required to stay separate in groups of 10 and therefore are separately served.
Still telling those people at those funerals that they can't be responsible and physically distance themselves. People don't necessarily need to physically comfort one another to comfort one another in grief.
Well, the expectation will be that the funeral director has taken steps to set out a safe way of managing the funerals. We've always said from the outset that we wanted to manage this risk. The sector has stepped up, and they've said that they can manage the situation adequately with the appropriate public health measures in place.
What would this look like in the marae setting?
Well, in the marae setting, there'll be support provided by public health units for those wanting to seek this exception. And it will mean, of course, in the first instance, that we will trust whānau and those who are grieving to take the right steps to keep their loved ones safe, and with the support of public health experts where required, we'll make sure that Māori are supported through the process.
So will they need a funeral director at the marae, or will that be the role of the public health unit to support people?
Well, obviously, where there's a funeral director involved, that's a relatively straightforward matter. I'll hand to the Director General to speak just about the way in which that process would run.
Thanks, Minister. Yes, so we've updated the guidance, which will be available from later today for funerals, deaths and tangihanga. The protocol on the marae for the tangihanga will be obviously with the iwi, and they will be required to abide by the guidance, which includes the groups of 50 and the very clear public health measures in place. They have been doing this already under Alert Level 3 with groups of 10, so it is just increasing the number. For the actual funeral, they will be working with the funeral director, but we would expect, and the feedback I got from the iwi leaders when I joined their meeting by Zoom with them earlier today was that the marae committees are very conscious of the need to maintain the protocols and keep people safe as part of the marae-based, part of the tangihanga.
So your expectation that those tangihanga would be confined to just one day, because normally it could be over 3 or 4 days. Have you discussed that with iwis?
Not specifically, but there's no particular reason why it needed to be one day. The main thing is that, as they have been doing under Alert Level 3, they've been bringing through individual groups of 10 that are not mixed, and so now they'll be able to do the same with groups of 50, but maintaining the same strict adherence with the public health protocols. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be just on the one day.
Bill, does this create any public health concerns for you, given the initial stance and decisions that you took about the risks of these events?
So I think it's important to remember that in 2 weeks' time, Cabinet will be reviewing where we are at anyway around group size in all settings. The original advice was around making sure we could get consistency across. This is a very specific situation, And one of the things here is that the funeral directors actually reached out on the same day, on Monday. I had a letter from the chair and chief executive. I responded immediately and asked the team to start looking at it, and they have worked with us on the checklist about the sorts of things that would need to be in place to address any public health risks. And the registration process is a declaration from the funeral director that those measures will be covered off, and of course they're part of a professional body, so we're confident that they will have the protocols and processes in place.
Is it realistic that, given the requirements on funeral directors or marae, that someone who's been waiting through level 3 and level 4 could potentially hold a funeral in the next couple of days, or is the process going to mean actually it's not going to be that quick?
Well, we're going to make sure the guidance and the forms are available today so that in fact they can register and be able to, as soon as we go into alert level 2 tomorrow, they could go up to that limit of 50 as long as they've got it registered with us.
Given that on Thursday when the Prime Minister laid out what level 2 was going to look like, a lot of people I think got false hope that meant that they were going to be able to hold funerals of up to 100 people, and then on Monday they were just kind of dealt this quite devastating blow. Are you sorry for the hurt that confusion has caused those grieving families in whānau?
So one of the things the Prime Minister did signal last Thursday was the broad arrangements for Alert Level 2, but she was very clear at the end of her comments that we may step our way into Alert Level 2 because it was a big step from 3 to 2. And our advice was based on identifying those settings and events that are the highest risk, and this was one of them, and we've had feedback, we've engaged, we've listened, and we've come up with a solution that I think people will recognise as a good way forward.
Why people might have been confused though, right? Even though she did say that, there was the kind of caveat at the end of her speech, you can see why people might have thought it was going to be opened up, mass gatherings were going to be opened up to 100. So do you apologise to people for the hurt and confusion that's caused?
Well, I think it was very clear in the Prime Minister's original comments, and also it has been clear, and people have understood from the clarification and the decision by Cabinet on Monday, have understood the groups of 10 issue. This was the one area where there was a lot of concern and there was a lot of feedback, and again, we've listened, engaged, and I think developed a really good solution working with the different constituencies.
Minister, there's been no shortage of anguish about this throughout the entire time. In your speech before you said you have listened, so what have you listened to?
Well, we obviously as members of Parliament have received considerable feedback on this, but actually talking through with the funeral directors was really helpful to understand how they could manage the risk, what they thought they could manage, and to hear their assurances about how they've been managing the situation through the existing lockdown levels. I mean, this is always an issue we've signalled as a risk that we wanted to manage carefully. The overseas examples where we've seen hundreds of people in some cases be affected, with tragedy attached to that through being infected at funerals is something that's been front of mind, and we tried to balance that with the concern about compassion for people in this very distressing situation. Nobody wants to see us go back to previous levels, so we've got to find a way forward, and what I've heard from the sector is that they can manage this, and in fact that they're willing to step up and take ownership of this, and they carry the responsibility then for how it's managed.
Can you understand though why in the last 24 hours when the National Party starts a petition and there's some anguish stories on the news that you're doing it for political cover?
I don't accept that. This has been a genuine wave of public concern since we had a picture of where we were heading in this alert level, and even actually in the previous alert levels there was concern certainly raised with me around the challenges for grieving families at that time. And as someone who themselves is a funeral celebrant who's taken a lot of funerals, I'm very alert to the challenges that families face at that time. They do want to come together to grieve, and it's been a very difficult situation for many, many families, and I think we've all accepted that, and that's why I said it was one of the more difficult challenges we've had during COVID-19 as a cabinet to confront.
I mean, it's good that you listened, but shouldn't you have listened sooner?
Look, we have this in place as the funeral directors have come forward, and we will have it in place for level 2.
Minister, you mentioned the feedback. Has the public pressure here forced your hand? Is this sort of a moment where you go, look, we did get it wrong?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. We've all been always concerned about how we would manage this risk, and funerals are exceptional. I think we can all accept that. It's one of the things that can't easily be put off. we've been concerned about the cumulative risk, and that's the thing the Director General has brought to our attention again and again, is that we need to be mindful that as we grow groups, there is a bigger risk factor, and so we've through those conversations with iwi leaders, with the funeral directors, and with church leaders, we've come to the view that this can be managed. But of course, we can't manage the risk on every front. This is the risk that we think we can manage and that we think is important to manage for the sake of those families grieving.
Hearing from church leaders this morning, were you in any way swayed that maybe there's a reasonable argument that they should be able to hold services with more than 10 people?
So I wasn't directly on the call with church leaders, if I can be clear about that, but I have heard from church leaders that some are very, very happy with the arrangements that are in place now, because they are concerned for the well-being of their congregations, and they know that there is a tendency to want to fellowship at those events, and that for many congregations they've found a way of continuing to stay connected electronically and through other means, and so there's a broad range of views out there on this, but generally the feedback that I've had is church leaders are comfortable with the situation for now, and everybody's looking forward to a situation where we can open up further.
Some churches were prepared to mitigate risk in ways that you've asked businesses to. What do you not see that? Is there no room there for reconsideration?
I think the principle of 10 people is something that is come through in the advice from the Director General. This is the one exceptional circumstance where we think we can manage the risk, but the cumulative addition of other risks is not something we're prepared to manage.
Why did this consultation start on the last day of Alert Level 3 rather than sort of being signalled when we were about to move into Alert Level 2?
I think conversations have been happening along the way, as I've already indicated, but we've reached a point where we think that there is a really good way forward here, where the funeral directors themselves are willing to take responsibility and have provided assurances that they can manage this situation.
I've got a question about masks on behalf of a colleague. Why won't, for either of you, why won't masks be compulsory on public transport in Level 2?
Do you want to speak to that, Director General?
We've talked to this over the last few days, and the evidence review we've got out there. We're just looking at whether whether the benefits outweigh the risks. The most important measures on public transport, as in any other setting, are the basic hygiene measures, including separation, physical distancing, and that's what we're going with. It's under active review all the time.
And what if regional public transport operators want to enforce masks? Would you stop them?
Well, I don't think they will be wanting to enforce masks, and that's one of the issues that we're considering is even if you recommend masks to people, what does that mean for people taking public transport who may not be wearing a mask? So at this point in time, our advice is you don't need to use masks on public transport. We've got it under active review.
Dr. Clark, you obviously review the settings at the Cabinet meeting in Monday week, I think it is, next Monday? Anyway, the next review. What are the numbers that you need to see for new cases to move to Alert Level 1?
We'll be looking at a range of factors, and certainly the advice from the Director General has fed into all of our decisions. We'll be wanting to have assurance that there isn't community transmission, that the patterns that we're seeing now of low transmission are ones that are continuing. Director General, you might speak to the kinds of things you'll be advising us on.
The comment I would make, Minister, is I think everybody will be watching the numbers, and we will be updating the numbers, and if we are getting cases, we will be reporting each day on where those cases are coming from. And so I think everybody will be aware the thing we are most concerned about is cases appearing which unexpectedly, and where we can't track them to existing cases. That will be the critical piece of information we'll be watching from a public health perspective.
So it's fair to say then, just as a follow-up, it's fair to say then that if we keep tracking with these numbers, with no community transition, we'll move to Level 1 at the next time.
Oh, look, that'll be a decision for Cabinet, but if things continue to be encouraging, we'll look at things then. We of course have signalled that we might want to take a staged approach with Level 2. We're sitting currently at 10 people typically for a gathering, and there's a way to go before we get to the 100 that was previously signalled as in the last time we were in Alert Level 2. So we'll be working our way carefully through how we open things up. Alert Level 1 has quite a different criteria attached to it.
So just
Bloomfield, you've said previously, you've said that you didn't want mixing and mingling, and that was the reason behind the tangihanga decision. Can you just explain what the difference is, with regards to a rugby team of 30 on the sports field, as opposed to, sort of in a scrum, as opposed to people at a tangihanga? Can you just explain that for people? Because they're making that comparison a lot. What is the difference?
I'd just make the comment that, of course, community sport, as opposed to professional sport, is the community sport hasn't started yet, and that's been signalled that won't start for a little while. So for professional sport, of course, that's a workplace, like every other workplace, and they will have to have in place very clear processes for all their players to make sure that there's no risk of infection, that anyone who's got any symptoms is not playing. So it's a very different setting. It's a workplace setting as opposed to on a marae at a tangihanga.
Take 2 or 3 more questions.
Thank you. ESR scientists have discovered traces of COVID-19 in wastewater samples. How could this benefit tracing and early detection of a case or outbreak?
Well, the monitoring of sewage for the presence of any organism, including COVID-19, may play a role in the future, but it's very early in science, and no country in the world is actually using it to help with their tracing at this point in time. I'm really pleased that ESR is developing the technology to be able to do this, so that if it does prove useful, we will be able to utilise it.
just in terms of the cabinet decision coming up and easing further restrictions or not, should New Zealanders instead expect maybe not a shift to a level 1, but increase of maybe 10 people instead to the gathering restrictions?
I won't get ahead of cabinet decisions on that, but we have said we think that a phased approach is a good way to go, and we'll look at.
But there was this sense of confusion when the gathering was set at 10 people, so could it be another 10 people, or is it likely to be more?
Look, that'll be well signalled before we make any changes.
Final easy one. What are the first freedoms under Alert Level 2 that each of you will enjoy?
Oh, goodness. Dr. Bloomfield, you go first.
Seeing my extended family and friends and spending time with them.
Yeah, I think just for me as well, seeing family members I haven't seen for a while is something I'm looking forward to. Thanks, everybody.